Good evening. This is the Carver Finance Committee. It's on February 6th, 2023. The time is 7:01 PM. Could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Area 58, for recording tonight's meeting. We have any public comment? Seeing none. Town Administrator and Finance Director updates. The first item is here that the committee is going to discuss with the Town Administrator and Finance Director. First item is financial policies in the 10-year Carver financial forecast.
Yo.
Well, give her a second. She'll be back.
So let me start outside of that. Just to remind people that we had a meeting on the 28th of January with the three boards and all the department heads came in. It was a great meeting, getting all the information out to all the boards at once. We had on the town side, we had the budgets put together, the requests by the departments. We are now going through that. Is this not on?
Yeah, it's just not very loud. Can you turn his mic up a little bit, please?
As long as they're picking it up at home. Is that better?
That is.
Okay, so we're going through the budget items now for the town side on the departments, and there's cuts that have to be made, just so that everybody's aware. We're not at a balanced budget right now. The school committee is voting tonight on their budget, and if that comes in with the number that we think it will, then we will have to make substantial cuts in services. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at over the next week or two, and working with the finance committee and others. So, did you want to open up with anything? Nope. Okay.
So, do we have a rough idea of ballpark? What are we talking about in cuts?
So ballpark, it could be anywhere from 800,000 to 900,000
In cuts?
in that ballpark. Yeah.
To the general budget?
To the general. Now, again, you got to remember that these were submitted budgets by department heads. There's some things in there that may be on a wish list that may be deferred down the road. There's also some increases, some major increases in gasoline, in propane and other things that we'll look at now that things have settled down. And it's a crapshoot. A lot of those things, you don't know what it's going to come in, like this year, where all of a sudden it more than doubled. So we'll look at those. We'll fine tune them, get down to the point where, hopefully we can save all the positions. And I don't want to make this sound so dark that, that we're shutting the town down or something. But it's something I want everybody to be aware of, that there are some major issues that we're going to be looking at to cut.
And this is because of, well, I guess the first question I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to open it to the entire committee. How much is the school cutting?
They went through their budgets, and
It doesn't tell me anything.
No, I know. Obviously they do their budgets on the school committee. So once that's done, I know they had a higher number, and they came down to what, 22,500.
So that's a substantial cut from what they were looking for.
Yeah, and what were they at? Do you remember?
I don't remember where they were at, but I know that that is only like 3% over last year.
And how do they pull that off exactly on a $17.9 million payroll? So what has to
So
get
what
hurt?
they were looking at is they had potential new positions that they're not funding, and they also they went through it line by line. Well, Ron and Scott Neef went line by line, looking at areas where they can reduce their budget. So I'm comfortable with what they did at this point. Now it's our turn. We were waiting for their budget so that we would have a number, what we would have to look at, and how far down we would have to go. So.
They're also using a lot of one-time monies.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. They're also using a lot of one-time money from sped grants, like moving a child into that fund or that grant. And hopefully that child doesn't come in costing more than what they're estimating.
And what
So
happens if it does?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I know they do have money available in their sped grant and out-of-district grants and things like that. But, and they're doing a high percent on sped circuit breaker reimbursement.
Pat?
Just question about the, if their, the revenues aren't coming in the way they're supposed to and so forth.
And can I interrupt you 1 second? Because I think Ellen was going that way. Like, one of the problems is the revenues are really down.
Yeah. So wouldn't that be cause to go back and look at the revenues, look at the bottom line, take a look at the share between the town and the school department, and just, in the school department, here's your new number. Have you looked at it that way?
Last year, we changed the formula for
Yeah,
that.
right?
And no, we haven't to this point.
Because it would just seem to me is just to reformulize it, and then that would be the school department's budget. I mean, that's I'm coming back from, years of doing that. That's what we always lived with. And if that is a factor of the budget, then that's just got to be recalculated, and then say, okay, here's your whatever 70%, and then we get the 30%, and then we deal with the town's budgets here. Now, if the school department, and I know about circuit breaker and other types of things, if they want to go into those more than they had planned to, I think part of that's at their own peril, because you can just do that so long, and when you're in a nice flow with that, you don't want to upset it. So, again, wouldn't it just be easy to go back and say, okay, the bottom line changed by this much, the 70% changed by this much, this is what you got.
Yeah,
And,
and
we've all signed up to that for decades now, so.
Yeah.
We do have that split, but we
Okay.
changed it from 70-30 to 67-32 last year.
Right, but then again, if the total revenue isn't coming in the way that it's supposed to, and that, first of all, he said, okay, the revenue is gonna be this, and here's your 67%. But the revenue's changed. So now here's your 67%, because the town's gonna live with the other 33. So I think that would be, I'd like it if, my suggestion would be if maybe you guys could take a new look at that.
Well, we'll definitely be meeting with them,
Okay.
all the time.
That would be my suggestion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry.
I'm sorry,
I'm done, thank you.
Mr. Clark.
So you're not suggesting changing the 67.5 and 32.5? You're
No.
just saying, this is the new revenue, so this is what 67.5% of
This
the
is-
revenue
This is the new split.
Face of the revenue,
Yeah.
as opposed to them working off of last
No,
year.
and that's what we did. So
Okay.
we looked at the bottom line and carved out 67.5% for them.
So that's what they're working,
Yes,
that's what
yes.
they
So-
know they're
So
expecting.
they're already
to work.
doing that.
Oh, okay.
Now, beyond that is the additional cuts.
Okay.
And if I could ask, from the revenue standpoint, you say revenue's down. Any particular area where revenue is down more than anticipated?
We had almost $400,000 worth of revenue that we counted on last year for solar building permits, which we're not going to have this year. And we haven't yet gotten the numbers from the state. So what we heard at the MMA meeting was what, 3%?
Yeah.
So 3% is about $300,000.
So
That-
3% more state aid than we got last year?
Correct. But
And then the
numbers are.
400,000 was anticipated growth in solar payments that did not transpire?
It did the prior year, so we couldn't use it for this year. So we had revenues for 2022, that we brought into '23, and then in '23, it kind of just went south, so we can't count on those revenues.
What do you mean went south?
Like, there's no more place for solar, or the builders aren't coming out and getting permits.
Okay, so there was no more expansion of solar leading
Correct.
to additional payments, but we had sort of factored in that there might be when we did the revenue and
Correct,
projection for this year?
correct.
Okay, or next year?
Are these, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just had a question. So I was going through this file last week. Sorry, can you hear me? So I was going through the FY '24 file last week. Is what you're talking about, the solar, is that, on here, like the fourth line down, new growth solar tax agreements? Because it looks like we used to have a budget here for FY '21 and '22. But when you go to '23 and '24, there's nothing there?
And I'm looking at the same.
So it's like it's up the top. Property levy tax revenue and the revenue portion. So if you go to the fourth line down, I just was wondering,
Haven't got the excise.
do we no longer have that?
This is actually the numbers that the forecast that was Meg, so it did drop obviously at some point. So I can't put anything there if she hadn't forecasted anything, and I don't see any other new revenue. Although we do have 4 new solar, but they're gonna be going in as miscellaneous receipts according to the contract agreement rather than as personal property.
Okay. Can I just ask one more question about the revenue on the top? So the other one, I was just trying to understand this to figure out the revenue forecast. So it looks like we also had 2 new lines in here for FY '24. It's the ambulance, cemetery, North Carver Water District transfer in, and then the free cash line.
Right.
Where would they have been in prior years?
So in prior years, when you did your final budget, the ambulance was not in here, and then you did a revenue transfer in on the warrant itself. So I'm just showing, okay, you have ambulance as an expense, so we need to show their revenue coming in to cover their expenses. And same thing with the free cash, it's like we want to put it in there to see what we have and where we're going to use it.
Okay. All right, thank you. It's just, with those 2 new sources, I thought we would have more revenue, but I guess we don't.
Well, so, on this rec summary final, you're showing total tax revenue for the year this is apparently estimated, of 31,065,564. 31,065,564. Is that, are these estimates incorrect? Are they just estimates? This is on the sheet that's titled Rec Summary Final. You don't have that?
Where is it?
5. 24 estimate. These are just estimates, and I guess my question is the estimates based on, obviously, a formula. So the new growth at 350,000 was just a number that we continue with, because that was the previous year also. So it looks like the only changes there is that we just simply added the 2.5%.
Correct.
So how far off from the real numbers is this estimate?
For local receipts,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we need to look at is where we stand for the first 6 months of the year, because the DOR won't let us go up more than 2% of last year's revenues. So when we put this together, we just level funded everything, with the exception of motor vehicle, or sort of.
Can I just ask
Yes.
one more question with the rec summary final? Should the total revenue here for FY '24 tie to the FY '24 forecast file? Because they seem like they're out about $800,000.
49,062.
Yeah, versus 49,886,689.
Interesting.
So whose is this?
So this is mine.
Okay.
This one, the one that you have that Meg put together in the cherry sheet amount What's included in there is also the local offsets for the library and for, I think it's school choice, maybe? It's one of the school charter, maybe?
Okay.
And then she backs it out down here.
Okay.
I just netted it out up here without,
So the 49,886, 689 doesn't go along with the 49,062, 029, because it's just a difference in the way we calculated it.
correct.
So I guess that I'm gonna jump right into the next question I've got, and I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. I talked with Beth, I talked with Sue today. There is an account in the, let me get it. I like to, won't be quite so goofy. In the trial balance report that was sent out, and we all got a copy of that Saturday, except for you, Tony, sorry. There's a designated solar net metering credit line that had 689,000 in it. 246,000 came out of it. We still am not sure why. And 441,000 got put back in it, leaving a balance of $884,720.71. I've heard everything from, it's not real money, it's a credit on our electric bill, to today, Sue believes that this is real dollars that's at the discretion of the select board. This was formed in 2017. I don't have the full printout. I've asked Sue to provide that for the last 7 years on that account. It's got something to do with, and maybe you might recall this, Ron, has something to do with Silver Lake. We're writing them a $250,000 check because of some solar project.
Not ringing any bells.
That's exactly what Mr. Carter said when I asked him that question also. I'm trying to go back to the history teachers here, and I'm not getting anywhere.
I was wondering if that wasn't,
meeting
that-
warrant.
if
I
that's
just
not
cut
the
out a
pilot
piece of
money
it.
that we.
It's not the pilot money. That goes into a different account, because I thought the same thing. It was at the third, and the third. And according to the research that Sue has done, that is not the case.
So we have
So-
800,000 real dollars sitting in an account.
884,720 real dollars on a budget you're telling me could come up $800,000 to $900,000 short. So if, and I'm just saying if, and I'd like the town administrator and the finance director to really dig into this, if in fact this is usable real money, and it's not, it's a fund equity account, it's a revolving account, so they don't sweep it, if that money can be transferred by the, so be it of the select board, then why is it sitting here?
I'd have one concern as to whether we could anticipate having that amount every year before putting it in the operating budget.
$441,747.08 got put into it this year.
So you could, at the very least, if that's a reasonable figure, add that to expectations for next year's budget.
So we couple that with the goofy idea that I had that I was shocked that Mr. Carter agreed with me, that we take back the $900,000 we've set aside for the library, take back the $365,000 we set aside for town hall, do both these projects the right way, bond the whole thing, and get it done. Put the additional money back into the capital plan to keep our capital plan on track.
17.
Because all we're doing here now, especially with budget cuts, is kicking this can down the road where it's gonna come back and bite us hard next year, the year after. And we're gonna get hit. We have a capital plan and a 10-year forecast for a specific reason, so that we don't have these sky is falling Chicken Little moments. And as it is, just in the normal course of life, there's bound to be a project that was unanticipated, that was not planned for, that something went wrong and something happened. But we still should not try to veer off. And I was under the impression that town meeting, and I gotta find the minutes, I think the town meeting passed the short-term loan, so, last year, on the library project and the town hall project, but apparently not, because none of that got done. And now we're looking at possibly a 5% loan instead of a 3% loan. So we continue to wait. I just think it's time to start acting on this stuff and finding out exactly what's going on with these. Some of these amounts of money that are sitting in this trial balance are ridiculous. They're numbers that good old God only knows. You know, we've got 143,000 set aside for open space. We've got 467,000 reserved for historic resource. We got 659,000 set aside for community housing. And this one's my favorite. Unreserved, undesignated. $1,300,725.16, and it's in the account unreserved, undesignated. Is that coffee money? What is that?
Is that Fund 27?
Huh?
Is that Fund 27?
Yeah.
That's all CPC money.
All of that is
Yes.
CPC?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, again, back to the rec summary, down at the very bottom? On the 24 estimate side, you're including free cash for capital, but that wasn't included in the FY '23 revenue. And it makes, which is why you have 49 million showing up for the 24 estimate and only 46 for 23. Just curious as to why you didn't include free cash from last year in there.
Last year, we just took free cash and we gave it all to the capital committee and also paid back into stabilization and stuff, so it didn't kind of show as part of our revenue. But if you took that free cash number out of there and then you took the capital money, the 997, and the stuff we're putting back into stabilization and OPEB, then you'd have a bigger deficit than we do right now. So I'm just using free cash as a revenue source for capital. Is basically why it's there.
So I do have a question about that. That was actually one of my questions. I guess I'm kind of confused. If we're back on the FY '24 forecast file and we go down a little bit, halfway to the page, how come we're not putting away that 1/3 on this file for the pilots program, the capital debt stabilization, the high school, like we had done in the past?
Right, so I think everybody's under the impression that that pilot money goes into a separate fund, and it doesn't. It's part of the general revenue funds, the revenue source, and then you have to back it out. So we don't have the money to back out a third into these projects. And we didn't last year either. We withheld on other things, not capital, but I don't think we put money into stabilization last year. There's a few things, if you looked, that we didn't do because we couldn't fund it. And even the year before that, there was a few things that weren't funded. I'll send you guys this sheet from 2021 forward, and you can see that there's a lot of these things that were left blank as the budget process became more inevitable.
So the only reason why I'm questioning that one is because I pulled the financial policies that we have on the website.
That's exactly what, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
overstepping. And I thought we stated in here that we were going to do this every year. And I think it started in '21.
I think it was part of a town meeting.
It was.
You
I
talking
thought
about
it was
the
number 5.
division of third, a third, and a third?
Well,
Yes.
because it's a sunset. These are pilot programs that have a 20-year lifespan, and
I
then they
mean,
go away.
I can tell you, when we voted them on the board, the select board vote included the distribution of the funds going to those accounts.
That's what I
So I
thought.
don't think it's optional
I don't
to
think
not
it is
send
either.
them there.
I know they weren't done completely last year. And let's see for sure. North Carver Water District didn't get the total amount last year.
I don't think.
The
were
high school
They weren't part of that. North Carver Water was
I'm
never
sorry,
part of that solar
The next one down, the
pilot
high
program.
school reconstruction fund were 1/3 of the pilot. Unfunded liability from OPEB, with 1/3. We didn't have the funding. We
So-
did put something into OPEB, but nothing into the high school reconstruction account last year.
So did we not, I just want to make sure I understand this. So do we not have the funding because the revenue didn't come in? Or did we not have the funding because we wouldn't have had enough money for operating expenses?
Correct. Like, so it's
For
the second.
operating?
Yes. So if you start breaking these down and you keep doing that from year to year.
Yep.
And if I put, let's just say in capital, it's supposed to be 3,700,000 and change. If we do that, you're cutting your services, your police, your fire, your school. So
I think my understanding with this program was we knew that eventually we were going to be at that point, but that we were still going to put this money up here and then go back to town meeting or make a decision that we didn't have enough money in the operating.
Yeah, I mean, we did numerous of these pilot programs, each one of them designated this way.
That's correct.
And it wasn't intended to be optional, that.
Yeah.
It was
that you-
also never intended to be a source of revenue. This was, quote, found money. This was never to be part of the original budget and then back it out anywhere. This was supposed to be a designated account where the town had no control over this money. If the solar agreement company sent you $1,000, then a third, and a third got divvied up the way it got divvied up, and the $1,000 never became part of the budget in order for us to back out again, because it sunsets.
We have a financial report from the DOR that does reference that. And it also says that the money's coming in as personal property income, and that the town needs to be aware that if they're going to do this, that they can't count it as revenue. But the town's always counted it as revenue and then backed it out a third, and a third. So if you want it that way, you can probably vote at town meeting to have a revolving account like you thought it was going into.
That's how it was sold to us. So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, all I know is when we took the votes on the select board for all of these pilots, that was part of the vote, was the division, a third, and a third, and there was no wording in there, if or but, it was like, this is what was expected to happen.
That's right.
And so it never should, so the revenue, when that revenue came in, it never should have been counted as revenue to the town. So it
Yeah, but
sounds as if we've been counting it as revenue and not meeting the obligation to put it into the third, and a third, or minimally, I guess, if at all. And now we've used that as operating money, and we'd have to actually make cuts in the operating budget to try to get back to where we were supposed to be.
Well, especially if we're using that fund as part of the forecast.
Right.
So if we're planning on that money and then looking at backing it back out, and then that becomes one of the line items that it's, and please don't misunderstand, we're not trying to cast anything on either one of you two tonight, please. That's not our intent at all. We're trying to get to the bottom of why we're here, and I'm not blaming either one of you. Nobody on this committee is blaming either one of you for this. We're trying to find out where, if there was something that you didn't know about, if there was something that wasn't brought to someone's attention. This is a good example of that. Nolan, you weren't here for that meeting.
Right.
You weren't through all of those talks when this is how this was sold to us. And this is how this was all sold to us.
Wasn't doing anything special.
That it, conversely, correct me if I'm wrong, when you were chair, I think somebody brought up the fact that we could put this money into the budget, and we were told, no, you can't, because it's still considered one-time money, it sunsets.
Because it was it was only for 25 years, we didn't want it to become part of the operating budget,
Well, because
because,
then it would stay in the levy.
and over time, it would, at the end of 25 years, it would be a real burden to the town to try to make up for all
That's
those
right.
funds. So,
Well, wait-
and I think, bottom line is, for going back to when we had Michael Malinowski, then to Rick LaFawn, and then to here, the institutional memory of the intent, I think, may have been lost along the way, and the understanding of how that was those were supposed to be, those funds were not supposed to be discretionary. Whether they should have been recorded differently, someone should have recognized that $800,000. That's not revenue. That has to go a third, and a third, and that's separate, and you just do it, and then you make your revenue projections from there. So, but again, I mean, this goes back to we were doing these in 2014, 2015, all along, pilots, in lieu of taxes.
No.
But now we're in a position where that 800,000 has essentially been absorbed into the operating budget. Goes back in the 90s, when the school reform monies. Some towns didn't realize when there was influx of monies coming in that those were one-time monies. They incorporated them into the budget, and then when the money valve shut off, they were stuck. We realized early on those were one-time monies and put it towards capital projects at the time. And this is a similar effect, where we've now absorbed monies that were intended to be distributed into the operating budget. So if we're $900,000 behind this year, if we enforce this suddenly now, you'd be $1.7 million behind.
Yeah, from my perspective, obviously that money is needed for the operating budget, but because there's very little development here or growth in the town. I mean, you look at the new growth, it's woefully low compared to other towns. And things go up more than 2.5%. Insurances go up. The cost of doing business, cost of repairing things, cost of buying things. Fire truck that used to be 1.2 million just a couple of years ago, $2 million now. So you see this kind of a domino effect that's happened. And you're right, that I was unaware of that, that it was set up that way, that it had to be carved out before counting it as revenue.
But the last thing anybody wants to do is tie the hands of the people in town that are trying to make these budgets work. And you're absolutely correct. Stuff goes up. I'm paying 30% more to run my business now than I was a year ago. So if there was a 2.5% increase, whoop-de-doo. What's that gonna do for you?
Yeah.
And I get it. Health insurance has gone through the roof. Employee benefits continue to go up year after year. The school continues to get more expensive. Transportation gets more expensive. Infrastructure gets more expensive. New growth is the key to everything that goes on in this town. It's the one thing that we seem lately to not be very good at. And I'm not going any further than that statement, but that's what I see happening. This has been my argument right along. We desperately need new growth. And I do not mean 400 new houses, so we gotta build schools and more fire stations. We need some commercial development in this town to do just exactly that. And when the solar boom was on, that was wonderful. And then, all of a sudden, there was moratorium talk, and there was strengthening the solar bylaws and making it more difficult to do the job. And now suddenly, what do we have? We have very few new solar projects coming online. Because they don't want to be bothered trying to deal with the town. It's not worth their aggravation. In the meantime, Middleborough's got incredible growth because they sit back and they say, welcome to Middleborough. What can we do for you? Carver, we say, there's the town line. Why don't you get on the other side of it? And that's a fact. And I don't care who doesn't like it. That's the truth. And we're going to be sitting here 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now with ridiculous tax rates and people laid off because we can't make ends meet. Pat?
Let's go back to this pilot situation again. If this began, what'd you say, Ron, 2014, 15?
2014,
It was really,
15,
I think, really came on like 17 is.
Well, I mean,
when
but
they
we were
started.
approving someone that
Yes.
picked up steam.
Yes.
Along the way.
So the reality, it wouldn't take long to go back and look, how was it handled in the financial applications and the financial
Well,
books?
the actual contracts have to be on file.
Well, how was it handled?
Sure.
Doesn't mean it was done any different than what we're seeing right now. How was it done back then?
In other words, when the money first started coming, was it being properly dispensed?
Right.
Or was it,
Or was it not?
right,
We don't know the answer to that.
right.
And that would seem to be an answer that I would be looking for. How was it done when it was initiated? If it was done right at all, and if it wasn't, when did it change and why did it change?
and if I had to guess, I would say that with the transition through financial leadership, that it's one of those things that just was not passed on to the people that succeeded.
That's what I think.
Was it done?
But at any rate, the bottom line is, we are where we are. So, the policymakers have to decide, are we going to insist that it be done as it was intended, in which case we increase the revenue deficit, or do we accept the fait accompli and maybe try to work in the future to try to meet because the select board at the time could have said, just throw it into the operating budget. But they chose to have it distributed to the three separate funds. But again, the thinking was, because as you say, it's sunset, you didn't want to get to the end of that, and suddenly the town is faced with this giant burden of continuing to add those into the operating budget
Well,
every year.
We were told, and I think John Carter was in the room at the time, we were told that if you took that money and put it in the operating budget, then it went into the levy. And when the money
Yeah.
stopped coming in from those projects, it stayed in the levy because you couldn't back it out. So now everybody, in town that pays taxes had to pick up a portion of what this expiring contract used to pay and no longer pays. So now it's our turn. Am I wrong, John?
Yes and no. The personal property new growth from solar
Yeah.
panels.
I think you're gonna come up here.
Grab a chair.
John's the other history lesson we could have tonight. Between him and Ron Clark and Pat Maha, we got history books here.
I mean, obviously, I think we all know personal property new growth, any equipment and things like that that come into town go into a separate fund and grow at 2.5% per year. The whole idea with the solar monies coming in from pilot programs, things of that nature, was that they were supposed to be designated to not go into the operating budget because eventually they would end. So the thing that was supposed to keep us on track was, through the changes of leadership, was the financial management policies that we came up with. Voted at town meeting, I think if you have them, they changed like multiple years, then they sat dormant for a while, but we're reactivating them. That's what should have been looked at in 2021 and 22, doing these budgets, follow the financial management policy, setting the money aside the way it was supposed to go. To your question, Pat, I think it was being done the way it was supposed to be done for years, but with the change and transition and everything else, it just stopped. So, yeah, the solar monies that are the set-asides don't grow in the levy, but the personal property from the equipment would grow at 2.5.
Does anybody know what the three funds were?
They were, you mean the amounts or what were they?
What were they going to?
Yeah, the middle high school building fund for the future day that will come when we need to build a middle high school. A third was going into OPEB, and the other third, I believe, was going into the capital and debt stabilization fund.
Yeah, I thought there was 100,000, I thought came off the school bond as well.
Yes, I think
Yes.
that may be correct.
Yeah, you could be right.
Yeah.
So it was money that was always tied up. And that's the way that was the, forgive the word pitch, but that was the pitch.
That was it, that's what, now, I don't think the contracts would reflect that, because that's internal policy that we designate.
That's correct.
Yes.
So I think if you read the contracts, they wouldn't, between the town and the solar developer, there wouldn't be any reference to where the monies went that they paid us.
But if you
Simply-
located the first check, that anyone, now Conservation signed off on 3 huge solar projects from Borrego, what was it, Dan? 6 months ago, 8 months ago, it was in the summertime. We had 3 sites that were completed, done, finished. So those ought to be all online. There ought to be money coming in from those. So I guess, are you saying we've received no solar contract money at all this year?
No, we have. It's just part of the personal property tax.
Okay.
If they weren't, so if those projects came in and weren't pilots and simply were approved projects, then they would go personal
Well, I
property.
guess they could go personal property, yeah. But do we do that with a mixture? I thought it was mostly 9% pilot programs.
That's what we were doing, I don't know what the
Well,
select.
that's how it was originally set up. And again, this is no fault of either one of you. I think that you're absolutely right. I think that there was no roadmap when you came on board. I think there was no roadmap left behind to follow. And, unless you get some historical status, and unfortunately, we didn't think of it either until, the skies
At
fell.
any rate, if at this point in time, that money from the pilots has been absorbed into the budget, then realizing that 20 years from now, 18 years from now, that's gonna stop. Going forward, the budget should try to pare down its dependency on that money a little bit every year until we're no longer dependent on it. Otherwise, it's gonna be, I guess we could leave it for the select board to worry about in 20 years, but that seems unfair. To do it right, we should go into future budget projections and pare a little bit away from that until we wean ourselves off of that 800,000, because to do it in one lump sum this year would take us from 900,000 to 1,700,000 in the hole.
Yeah.
So we can complain that we didn't follow the procedure, but it means decisions that would have made over the last few years would have been different, because we didn't have an extra $700,000 or
Right.
$800,000 in the budget. So we would have been facing that even earlier. Okay, so it is what it is at this point.
Yeah. So really, the only thing that could potentially solve some of our problem right now is if you could find out what that solar net metering account is truly all about historically and
What portion might be
what
replicated
portion
annually.
could be
Yeah.
taken out of it, what portion could be thrown back in the general fund, could we use it, how much do we need to set aside for whatever the heck's going on with Silver Lake?
This is the contract, if you guys want to look at it. And 2017 town meeting voted to use the money to pay for Fisher Road solar. And it strictly says it's just for that. So if you want to use that $800,000, you need to go back to town meeting and re-vote the sources of the use. Yeah.
What the hell is the Fisher Road Solar?
It's in Dartmouth, and it actually is the net metering solar company that brings down our electricity for the whole town. And then we get the N-Star check with the credits on it. So the 100%
Oh,
comes
that's the
in.
one the residents draw on to reduce their electrical rate?
No,
No.
it's an actual pilot agreement.
So,
And how much comes in annually from that?
What
it's like
was,
400,000 this year,
yeah, so what was the balance, the beginning balance of that account?
6 something. $689,210. We took out $246,337. We took in $441,747, leaving a final balance of $884,720.
But that's designated, it has to be used for what?
According to the warrant at town meeting, it says to make payments to the Fisher Road solar for electricity generated for the town.
How do you make payments to it if the check's coming in because of the project?
We're getting a check from N-Star,
Yeah.
and then we're getting billed by Fisher Road. And then.
Is that what that 246 is?
Yes. And then
Actually, it goes to Silver Lake.
Silver Lake as well. Silver Lake gets 60% of what we get in, and we get 40.
Would you just look into that whole thing, Bob, and let us know, do some historical stuff on this for the next meeting, which is probably gonna be next Monday night?
So this is sort of like when you put solar panels on your own home. Eversource may give you a check,
Yep.
but then you may have to turn around and pay somebody else for the money that you receive.
But there's a $200,000 plus balance in from the previous year after we took in and took out and, you know.
Right,
this
it is
number's
accumulating
gone. So
money.
What do we do when it's $1 million next year? I mean, at what, there's gotta be a place, someplace where we can use some of this money for something other than pay Silver Lake.
But as Sue says, we may have to go to town meeting in order to redistribute it. Doesn't help us right now, it looks like.
Anybody else?
I have more questions. Sorry.
What do you apologize for?
I'm so stuffy tonight. So I guess it's maybe, and I'm on the capital committee, I just can't wrap my head around why there's only 997,000 available this year for capital. So when I'm looking at the schedule, I see it, but it had been projected before tonight, or even years before, to be more like 3 million.
795 and
Yeah.
change. Yes.
So how
Well, we
did it
could-
just
I could
drop?
put it back in there, but when we get to the bottom line with the 67, 33 split with the school,
Yeah.
you're losing services by that amount of money.
Yeah. I think that's how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's how this was built, and then maybe we make the decision afterwards to cut out of operating, but I'm not sure.
I can take the
Does anyone else know?
historical.
So if she puts this back to what it should be, which was like a 3,000,007, I'm on, in the middle of the first sheet on the big one. It's in the section transfer to other funds per
Oh, I see it.
policy.
Yep.
So you can see it just goes from 3,000,004 and then down to 997,000. But I had, let me see,
Then back up to 3.6 the following year.
yeah.
Well, I don't have those numbers. I must have an old update. This must
Definitely.
not be current.
So I just changed for current
997.
year.
I don't
Try
have
to
that.
balance a budget.
Just trying to see.
Why don't I have this?
So it goes up to
Oh, I do.
3.6, because that was Meg's sheet that she used.
Yep.
Okay, so this year, it just has a 997. just because she changed the formula of how, not formula, the format of how she's doing it. Why don't you
Well,
explain?
right, that,
Okay, so that had the existing debt in there?
Correct.
That's why, okay.
So but it didn't change the formula for the projections.
correct. Because
So we really don't have 3.6 million next year either.
we might, prices might go back down again. I don't know. It's the economy right now.
So I just want to make sure, so our existing debt is somewhere around $2.6 million a year?
1.6. The debt that you guys were paying for, we also had the excluded debt from the school, which wasn't
That was the
included.
override.
Yeah,
Okay. So if you took the school excluded debt, the debt we had before, plus this 998,000, we get to somewhere around 3,600,000, 3,700,000?
That's what it says here.
3741. Yeah.
So it says debt and capital available funds for capital outlay. So you combine them, the 2.255 million includes the existing debt plus the 997. Is that what you're saying?
yes.
Okay.
I think you previously also pointed out that we didn't get some agreements, we had some tax challenges from some of the larger taxpayers that
Correct.
did not get settled in
Correct.
time.
We have 26 ATB cases out there, and you
What is
have
that
to,
total? Do we have a total on that roughly?
we're holding on to $800,000 that didn't get certified as free cash because of it. You can't, it's a liability, so we have to keep the money in the bank.
Right.
I mean, your original
$800,000.
projection sort of had hoped that that would have been settled
Correct,
for free cash.
correct.
Thank you, Sue. I was just trying to understand this, but I was trying to get my head around it.
That's what I was doing last year.
Do we have a, and for perhaps next meeting, could we get a year-to-date actual of where we are on the current budget?
Revenues?
Of everything,
Okay.
revenue, expense, percent of projected budget. We talked about that today. An actual expense for FY '20. I'd like to see FY '22 budget, FY '22 actual, and '23 budget, '23 actual to date. So we can get to date January 30th, 31st, that's great. If it has to be December 30th, so be it, still give us an idea of where we are after 6 months. And then we have to start looking at what we're gonna do. In the meantime, I'd like, and this is, I'll see what the rest of the committee wants to do, but I'd like to have the town administrator and the finance director, get with bond counsel and find out what the current bond rates may be, how easy is the funding at this point? Do we even still have a AA+ rating? Because that's gonna play into it, so that we can talk intelligently about whether we're gonna bond these other projects and try to make this town hall look like something that's not in a third world country.
Beth, is capital outlay looking into that? Considering options?
Yes, we
Yeah.
are, sorry. I had a cold tonight. Yeah, no, we definitely are. That's, we don't only have, if we go by this, I'm sorry, $998,000 for
Right.
capital and the expenses, the project's coming in over 3 million.
I mean, I tend to agree with Alan to put everything into a
Yeah.
pot and bond it.
Just get it done.
Partly because of just, we've sort of kicked the can too far down the road. We've reached the point now of critical mass, and already by kicking it down the road, we've gone from getting a 2 to 3% interest rate up to 6%.
And we've gone
5%,
from
whatever it is.
Did we?
Dave was telling me the other day that.
Well, 4 to 5, whatever it is, significantly higher than it would have been a year or 2 years ago.
Right.
Right,
We-
and this
we didn't
building
lock
was
in.
gonna be somewhere in the $700,000 range to side it. Now we're looking at well over $1 million. And then he said to me, and that's with vinyl siding and wood trim. Well, originally, it was gonna be cement board, like we did the police and fire station, and plastic trim, so this can be done. And now we're cutting back on the quality of those products because of the cost of everything. So none of this stuff's gonna get any cheaper. And all that's gonna happen is we're gonna try to keep cutting these corners and cutting these costs, so we wind up putting, bubble gum and a Band-Aid back on the building, and we don't know what damage has been done underneath all this siding and underneath all these corner boards. And we won't know that till all this stuff comes off the building. And that's all gonna be a change order at time and materials. Pat?
As I said last week, it's more than time to do this. We owe it to the residents of the town. When you look in the center of the town, you've got a brand new school, brand new police station, brand new fire station, all beautiful buildings. The library and the town hall are showing their ages badly. It gives a bad impression. We owe it to the residents of the town to provide some nice-looking buildings, and they all should be nice-looking buildings. And I say, we got to do it. Let's bond it. Let's get it done, and let's do it right.
And while we're at it, let's put the roof on the library, which is on next year's capital plan. We're there, we're doing the job, get it done. So when we walk away from the library, unless the light bulb blows out, we're done over there.
And we're in for a few tough years. Of course, it depends on the economy. If the economy comes back, cranberries come back, that'll all help. But I still look wistfully at how close we came to getting the project in North Carver. And if it wasn't for some challenges after the town meeting vote, we might be well on the way to be only a year or two away from significant relief coming in. As it is now, where they're starting from scratch, and we may be 4 or 5 years away from getting some significant commercial relief that would have really helped us address all these issues. And
They went to Middleborough, where they're building the same project.
Do we know who it was?
Huh?
Do we know who it was?
It was Hilda.
No, but who's gonna actually use the
Oh,
warehouse?
who knows? They just,
No,
they
we
built it
never
on
knew
spec.
that.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
Sue, when we were looking at the bonding last year, did we were looking at the short-term bonding, we didn't lock into any rates for that one?
No.
We didn't, okay. I just wasn't sure if we had locked one down.
Now, obviously, this is gonna be probably in the, I would guess, in the $3.5 to $4 million range, so this might have to be like a 10-year note or something. It's not gonna be what we consider to be short-term. But if that were to go through, that would free up the $900,000 we've already got set aside for the library. It would free up the $365,000 or $70,000 we already have set aside for the town hall, and allow that money to go back into the capital accounts, so that we can keep some of this capital improvement stuff that's on in process, and keep some of that on track, because kicking that stuff down the road doesn't work either.
no, I mean, by properly taking care of the capital stabilization account, that's how we're able to build a fire station without having to go to an override. That's
Right.
how we built a police station without going to an override. How we did, what, $10 million repairs to the school roof without having to go to an override.
3 new
So
fire engines.
anyway,
So, and the fire engines, I think, are coming off, I think it's 2 more years, something like that.
I think 27.
26,
I
I
think
think.
27.
26,
I
27.
think.
so with a little luck, maybe there's 400,000 out of that solar revolving account that might be able to be added to the operating account. That would help.
Give Bob something to do. He loves having something to do.
Can I ask a question about the forecast? So the budget, the school budget for 2024, that's projected out by them. So they're budgeting, or they're projecting that they're gonna have a reduction by 3.1 million from the green to the yellow.
Yeah, I saw that.
So can we
Who's
just,
gonna make up, how are they gonna make up the 3.1 million?
This-
It's a top line in the,
Yeah, if
I'm
you
not sure
click
the
on
percentages.
the individual cell, you'll see the formula pop up in the formula line. You'll see how they get there. Some of it is multiplied at 2.5%, others is multiplied at 3%, others is multiplied at a minus number. Obviously, this is an Excel spreadsheet that was created with all kinds of formulas all over the place, and I don't have the answer to that question. I'm not sure that Sue would either, unless you get right into the heart of the
But I
program.
mean, on the surface, they have a budget of 25 million for 23, and then 24, they have a budget of 22 million.
And then it gets worse.
Right, and then, so, is that an error in this form, or is that what they're
It
projecting?
looks like it equals line 69 times Q69 times Q72. So let me see what 69 is available revenue, and 72 is the 2.22%.
So it's based on revenue, so really, it's not, it's really not a forecast based by what the school thinks they need.
Yep.
It's
And
based
then
on.
if you go the
revenue.
following year for FY '24, you see the minus 9.83% change? So
Yeah.
you take the 33 million times minus 9.83%, and that's how come that drops down to $22 million for the school. Now, I don't know where this change number actually comes from. This is the sum,
The ratio changed too.
yeah,
Yeah.
good.
So this just says school budget as recommended, but it's recommended based on the revenue,
Yep,
not based on what the school's needs are.
Right.
yep.
Okay.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes, ma'am.
One more question. Again, on that same sheet,
Minus 14.
are the numbers from the cherry sheet, is that exactly what the state told us we were gonna get? Because it really jumps up for, charter tuition to 1,000,003. And last year it was 746,000. Am I looking at the right?
It's actually not just charter tuition, it says charter tuition, et cetera. So the
Oh.
school department has several assessments for cherry sheets that need to be accounted for.
What would that
Still a
be?
600,000 increase.
Yeah, what would that be?
I could
Okay.
get it for you.
Just it jumps up so much. That's all I was wondering. And even the first cherry sheet direct expenditures went from 232,000 to 540. I just didn't know if that was coming, right from the state or if
It's
we knew
coming
those were-
from their cherry sheets, that their FY '23 cherry sheet numbers. They haven't given us '24's numbers yet.
Okay.
So the numbers we're showing in FY '24 are estimates?
Estimates.
So, for instance, for the first line of cherry sheet direct expenditure, school library, goes from 232 to 540. That's just our internal estimate as to what it's gonna go to?
Based on what was actual last year after the governor voted. Is governor in the state?
So you know where the money's coming out of?
I'm sorry.
Do you know which budgets you're cutting?
All of them.
I don't mean to make light of it, but this is,
No, I know it. That's,
I didn't anticipate it was gonna be this severe.
Yeah, we met with Ron today on the school budget. So we're getting the information, and that kind of was a wake-up call of that high. We anticipated, you always anticipate once the department heads put in their budgets with their a level funded budget, level service budget, but with a couple of wishes that they need, and they want this, they want that. So we knew we'd be cutting back on some of that stuff, but
So what we went through a week ago Saturday were sort of level service plus.
plus, yeah.
Okay, so.
And, and you recall there was some discussion about, to some of the department heads that, maybe you want to look at adding to your, don't do it. If you're listening, don't add anything else, because right now, we're looking the other way, going down, so.
I'm looking at, again, I'm on the trial balance. Designated for FEMA storm reimbursement. That's the fund equity account. It's got $155,292 in it. Is that the reimbursement we got for last year's snowstorm, or
Is there,
it's a 29 account? It's a fund equity account. It says designated for FEMA, MEMA storm reimbursement. So that would tell me that,
That's from the prior years, yes.
I'm sorry?
That's from a prior year.
So that's available funding. Could that go into the snow removal budget? Cut that snow removal budget by $155,000?
If you want to talk to Tom Walsh about that. Because yes, we paid out that money, and then we got reimbursed, and it's theirs. In my opinion, that should be closed out to free cash every year. If we're not in an active storm and waiting for the money to come back, but if we paid for those salaries out of general fund and all the other expenses out of general fund, we put a worksheet together and say, can you give us X amount for reimbursement? It should go back to the general fund.
Well, that's what we did this year. We got back $125,000 on that 26-hour snowstorm. Shelby and Tom worked endlessly.
We haven't gotten that money in yet.
Sorry?
We haven't gotten that money in yet, but you're right, that's from a snowstorm from
It
last
took
year.
them 3 months
Yeah,
with the
we got the
paperwork that FEMA required. You had to talk about dotting i's and crossing t's, and every minute that everybody spent, and since it went over 2 days, it needed to end, because God forbid they can figure out that it's over 2 days in the federal government, so it had to end, and then we had to start again on the next day. It was ridiculous, the amount of paperwork that had to be, I think the file was something like this thick to get back $125,000 in the snowstorm. That made national headlines. It's not like we're lying about it, it snowed. Only the government. So there's 155 grand there, of course, Tom will hate me for that. And none of the ARPA money, I'm assuming, can be used for anything that we happen to have in our capital plan or in our long-range plan or any of that stuff.
Some of the capital items are in opera consideration.
That's not gonna help us at all.
It'll help the capital outlay,
Okay.
taking it off the list if they pass.
Now, so let me ask a stupid question. If we were to take, let's suppose, hypothetically, if town meeting approves the bond, and town meeting approves the money that is set aside for these 2 buildings to go back, does that money have to go back into the capital, or can it go into shoring up the budget, or does it go back into free cash, or does it go into the capital and debt stabilization fund? Where would that money go if the town said, okay, you can have the cash back, we'll just borrow all the money we need to do this project?
You can put it back in the capital stabilization account as long as it's voted that way at town meeting.
But it can't go back into the general fund, into the general budget.
Well, it's one-time
It
money. I
can.
don't think you'd want it in the operating budget anyway, would you?
It's not really one-time money, it came out of the operating budget because it was a percentage. That's how it got into the capital and that's the capital fund. So could it go back to its original location to begin with to shore up the budget?
But you won't have that next year.
But we may not have this problem next year.
That's true.
I'm not saying that we would count on that 1.3 million or 1.2 million dollars and make that part of the budget next year going forward. But it could, I'm just wondering if it could cover the shortfall for this year. I'm trying to avoid the building crashing down on employees, because that's always the first place that, where we just stop buying paper. Probably save a ton of money with Mason. Everybody gets laptops and electronic correspondence. No more print, no more printed. And you can give back the copiers while you're at it. $80,000 a year.
There's also 2 other accounts on the trial balance. One of them, it's Fund 20 for CDB housing rehab. So
What is it?
CDB housing rehab, so it's Community
What page?
Development Block Grant. For me, it's the very first page. If you have this, that you guys got handed out on Saturday.
This is what I sent you all in an email, by the way.
You turned over 255.
Yeah, the 255.
Do I have that trial balance? You said,
I
did you
sent it
know
in
it?
an email. You should have it in your email.
It's the one with all the attachments.
No, it says trial balance right on it. Oh, I'm sorry, what is it? I
Okay.
guess
So the 5th one down on the 20.
Reserved for,
Housing rehab, CDBG housing.
I see
rehab.
it.
Okay, so we had that grant at some time. We helped needy seniors that needed to have their homes fixed, things like that.
Yeah.
Then we put a lien on their home. If they sell their home before 20-year period, they owe us that income back.
Yeah.
And when they give us that income, if it's under, I want to say it's $35,000, it's supposed to get close to the general fund at the end of the year. This has been going on since 2014, so the program began a long time ago, and we stocked away $255,000. That is money that came back to us. If it was over $35,000, then it needed to stay in the fund to be used for something similar.
So now we have to find out how much of that $255,000 was in less than $35,000 increments.
All of it.
Is that what you're saying?
All of it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yep.
Look at you, pulling that
Who
out.
controls that account?
Just the money going in.
So the selectmen can tell you to transfer it, or?
They can. I can just close it out. I can ask, not that I want to, but I can ask DOR to recertify free cash by showing them that this stuff should have been general fund.
I'd rather see this just go back into the general fund, because
Okay.
that's where we're coming up short.
But how was it set up originally?
The fund?
Can
This
you
one
do
here?
that?
Yeah. So it was originally set up, we got, let's say, a $500,000 grant from the state to help, like I said, individuals fix their homes. We put a lien on their home. They sell it soon, they owe the money back to us.
Was it for weatherization, winterization, upgrade?
It could be for
It was something
anything,
like
roofs, boilers, anything that happened to these elderly people that couldn't afford it. They would apply.
And was it a 0% loan? Is that what it was, basically?
It was a 0% loan if they stayed in the house for 20 years.
Right.
If they didn't, then they need to pay the whole thing back when they sold the property.
Because we had a lien on it.
Right.
And this was only for elderly?
I believe it was.
So 20
you-
years is a long time for.
Can you dig a little
But-
deeper into that, Bob?
Yep. we'll look at
So
it.
did-
$255,000 is a lot of money.
But did we spend the whole 500?
I don't see,
I'm just wondering if you have to give it back
to whom?
to the state
No.
or whoever gave it to
It
you.
was a grant, right?
It was a grant. So as long as, if they didn't fulfill their part of it, we got to keep the money.
Okay.
You find it, Tom?
I don't think I got it.
You didn't send it to me?
Again, the caution here would be, it can help us for this year, but we'd have to be aware that next year, we wouldn't have the 255. So we're talking about maybe trying to patch our way together to make this year as painless as possible, but it might just be postponing the same problem next year.
Right.
Oh, you know what, too? It was also part of this. Wasn't it part of this?
This one too.
From Saturday. Yep.
It's part of this one you can read from a satellite.
Street lighting, the money came in.
So you have a copy of this, right, Walter? Because this was part of the Saturday stuff. You weren't here Saturday, that's right. Maybe that's why everybody else got, I'm sorry. I thought I had sent that out in the email.
Yeah, but so we never did that?
If we did,
So we're actually talking about another one on there, the LED streetlight retrofit grant.
Say this again? Where is this?
So it's a 20, about 2/3 of the way down. 53,599.10. If you look at the amount, it's pretty easy to find. LED streetlight retrofit grant. So did we ever do the
that's,
actual?
I don't know. The revenue came in
How's that
in FY '20 and FY '21, and there hasn't been any activity in there since.
Was there ever any activity?
Just the revenue coming in.
It's a 20 account?
Yeah,
Yep.
20,
To the second page of that big sheet that we had, it's, 20/35/20/07000.
53,599.10
Yeah, just go to the.
was the amount. Was that a grant?
Yeah.
So did we do the streetlights?
Community grant.
Streetlights have all, to the best of my knowledge, the streetlights are done in the town, but I wouldn't swear to it. I'm pretty sure they're done.
So I guess the idea is to go back and look at these potential sources of additional income that might help us out of the hole we're in this year.
We're looking at a Green Communities grant. It's a fund equity account. It's got $158,000 in it. I'm not saying we can take it and use it, but we should find out what it's there for.
That one was last year's grant, so I'm not really sure. But I can
Had
find out.
Had 38,000 in it. We got 120 put in it last year. I assume this Mass Works one is that $3.2 million grant that we got. This is what's left
Yes.
for that interchange. Now, is that interchange done and billed out, and this is what's left over, or?
So, well, it's still finalizing it. We haven't gotten the final papers yet. So I would not touch that.
Yeah, street light retrofit grant. Still 53,000. Also, while we're on this sheet, one of the things on tonight's agenda is the property on Lakeview Street. So Dan has some great ideas for what to do with that Lakeview Street property. Obviously, the Recreation Committee is trying to do a pickleball court behind the Council on Aging. And then we have the Council on Aging building, which in this cold weather the other day, pipes froze in there. I understand that they were mostly water pipes and drain pipes, because the building's a barn. And we had the wind coming off the pond and so forth and so on. So Dave Siedentoff and crew were there most of the day Sunday fixing that. And they wanted to make sure there were no other problems with it, which is why the COA was closed today. Is it opening tomorrow?
It is, yeah.
So-
Actually, had to have a plumber come in too.
We've got three entities working in two pieces of property. We've got recreation involved in a pickleball court. It's also a pond, it's also the beach, it's also a parking area, it's the Council on Aging, and then next door is the land that the Conservation Commission bought last year from the Conservation Land Acquisition Trust Fund, which is an account that was established by the legislature, and I finally located it, that's got now about $300,000 in it. But when the property comes out of Chapter 61A, the landowner has rollback taxes going back to, I think it's up to 5 years. That amount of money, additional that he has to pay, goes into this fund. That's how the legislature established it, that's how town meeting voted it. There is no cap on it, it just continues, and it's for the sole purpose of purchasing land to be kept into conservation. Could we use it to buy, you know, if some of this 61A property, when they take it out of 61A, the town has right of first refusal? Could the conservation fund be used to buy that land? Yes. So, that being said, it was a suggestion, and I talked with Dan on the phone about it, that we request that the select board, without getting crazily involved in this, come up with a master plan for the three pieces. Now, the conservation has restrictions on it that it has to be used for conservation educational purposes. Obviously, the pickleball court is going to be recreational along with the beach. Parking is a challenge down there. And then the Council on Aging. So it's a gem of a piece of property sitting on Sampson's Pond that right now the town should have a master plan as to what they're gonna do with this property going forward. Dan's working with CPC to put a pavilion.
And some other apparatus, yeah.
He's also talking to some of the grant providers about turning the house into a self-sustaining, off-the-grid kind of a house where it's gonna be completely self-supportive. And this could be grant money that's available. There's a lot of, especially in this particular climate now with this government in Massachusetts, that are pro-renewable energy. That's the nicest way to put it. If you can plug something into a tree, they're all for it. If it starts up with an ignition key and a gasoline, they don't want to hear it. So we should take full advantage of that. If we can get charging stations under a grant program, it's money we don't have to spend. If we can get a couple of cars under a grant program, it's money we don't have to spend. And you know, there's certainly the Board of Health and the building inspector can tool around town in a little electric something or other, as opposed to the two old leftovers that he's driving around in now. So the rest of the conversation here was, I knew from a long time ago that there was a maintenance account, because as more and more property is being turned over to Concom, we need to be able to maintain it. So I asked Sue, and she could not find anything in here that said conservation maintenance account. I talked to Sarah Ewens. She knew there was one at one time, and it was Jill Martin who dug through and last week come up with an account that was called the Wetlands Protection. And as we dug deeper into that, I believe, designated for wetlands protection, it's a fund equity account, is $52,385.95 in it. I believe the $2,890 was put into it this year, that is in fact the conservation land, maintenance account. And if you would be so kind as to do some digging into the history on that, and I think we talked about it today on the phone. If it turns out that that is correct, and I believe it is, if you could reword that so that it's a little more definitive and easier to find. And yes, we found the Land Acquisition Trust Fund. It was titled Land Acquisition, period. So it had no designation as to why and so forth and so on. So that mystery is solved. But as far as the master plan goes, I just think there should be a working master plan, because there's very quickly going to be a lot of fingers in this fire here.
So if I may, so Mark Townsend and I talked about that at length a few weeks ago, about doing some kind of a study of that whole piece of property, the adjoining properties, to make sure that if a pickleball court goes on, it doesn't affect something else in the future. For instance, the parking for the seniors. If something is done at the Lakeview House, will that have an effect on the other properties? So we're putting together a plan to do that, to have, it might be an engineering firm come in to give us an overall, what can be done with that property. Secondly, tomorrow, actually, you bring up about the electric charging. We have a meeting with there's grants out there that they'll put up free to the town, electric charging facilities throughout the town. Maybe the library, town hall, the schools, and have them set up, and they'll come in and do the whole thing. So we have a second meeting tomorrow. They're gonna do a review of what we have for buildings and availability off the grid, so they can tie into a electrical pole or something. And so we'll have more information on that too.
That's good.
So we're moving ahead in that direction.
I
Because
would-
that's the way the state's going, as you said.
It is, it's just the way it is, and I would request that if you're gonna do anything with that Concom property, I think that I'd like to see you involve Dan in that
Oh,
stuff.
of course, yeah.
Because he's proven to be extraordinarily knowledgeable, and he's put a lot of time and effort into what he'd like to see happen to that building. So I still.
Yeah,
haven't
and it's
been
not,
inside
it's
the
not to
building.
do anything with the building. Right now, it's just to get an idea of what
Right.
can be done with the property.
But he's got some great ideas going forward, and I think he has some funding ideas going forward that would certainly be beneficial. There's no reason why we can't, and I truly believe that we can find enough grant money to do a lot of the project down there, because it benefits all the right stuff. It benefits conservation, it benefits energy, it benefits senior citizens, it benefits recreation. There's all kinds of grant money out there for all those projects.
Talking about grant money, it was in the paper the other day that Carver was among a handful of towns that did not get their outline for how they were gonna deal with the housing. growth.
MBTA. Yeah.
Relative to the MBTA. And it made reference to the fact that one of the penalties could be, when we apply for grants that could be held against us. Was that specific to all grants or just grants that might be affiliated
No,
with?
so this came before the select board, discussion, probably 6 months ago. And the grants that were available were grants that we wouldn't be applying for.
There's already 3 grants in the legislature.
Yeah.
The Boston Globe article was wrong.
But
They
it-
can't do anything with a housing grant, because that's not part of the original legislation.
So a short version is that, talked to Tom Bott today, and he's working on filing the document, just so we'll be in compliance with that. You know, the concern is that if, you can have up to 700 housing units,
750.
750 housing units, so that's the kind of the
We're
trade-off.
gonna file and say no, though, right?
Yeah, we're gonna file the document, this is only an action plan.
Yeah, good. Just
So
say no.
we had filed the
Well, you don't
first,
say no, you give them you give them an outline.
I
Yeah.
gotta tell you
Kick
something,
it
a
down the road.
neighboring town didn't file either, and they have no intention of filing. They took a
Yeah.
vote, they want no part of it, they're not filing nothing. Let the state turn them down for a grant, and they'll sue the state.
yeah, well,
I don't know how that'll fly. At any
yeah, I
rate,
know.
I think it's a great idea.
I think you
Chip
play
off
ball
your
with the
ball.
state for as long as you can until you don't
Yeah, yeah.
at some point.
Too dictatorial.
So that's, I
They
saw
don't
that
tell
in
you
the paper
after
too
they
on
force you to
Saturday.
Build your 750 units, where you're gonna put all the kids. Nor do they give you any grant money.
No,
for that.
I understand the implications of having to do it. I'm just saying, though, that there's no reason to precipitate anything negative happening to the town unnecessarily.
We'll see.
We think alike.
Resist, resist, resist. So I think we did it all.
Yep, we did.
Dan, did you want to add anything to the Concom idea?
The only thing I would say,
I think,
oh, yeah.
you have my seat.
It's okay. The only thing I would say is some of the initial conservation concepts are I can't take credit for all the ideas. A lot of them are requests that came in from COA, from the senior community, from the school, from the high school, and other groups that had asked me for ideas and solutions to some of their needs for another space to meet for education purposes, outdoor education purposes, learning more about conservation and how we could be more proactive in educating the public and the community about those those issues. And 44 Lakeview seemed like a natural spot for that, logistically for the COA and the people that use that facility. We can very easily make a path down to the water ADA compliant. Part of the plan is to potentially have an observation deck and resting benches and a floating dock for recreation purposes there. The pavilion is simply a three-season multi-use space. It's and it's one that can benefit people that are coming to the COA property, people that just want a picnic, people that are over at the COA and want to have a chair yoga class. Scouts can meet there for their meetings during the warmer months of the year, things like that. The house is one where there are a slew of off-grid concepts and green technologies that can be used, that we're in a perfect location to take advantage of. Everything from geothermal to solar and so on. And off-grid, by the way, I know that a lot of solar systems plug back into the grid. That is actually not off-grid. That's simply using solar. I'm talking about a concept where we're actually the operation of the building and the space is in fact off-grid. So and the reason for that is because I like to have projects that are created through grant funding and in-kind labor so that it doesn't burden this committee, for example. Perhaps the one thing that I'm always open to is having a committee to bring ideas so that the amalgamation of whatever we come up with is one that it makes sense for everybody. But, we have been sort of working on this for a while, and so my hope is that whatever committee it does come up or whatever study does get decided upon, that it's done in a timely fashion, because we want to also have a sense of momentum to actually make some of these things happen while we have the interest and the fiscal support. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Dan. Any questions?
No.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment?
Sure.
Yeah. Just, I know that we're looking at a operating budget deficit, but I still feel strongly when we look at certain departments, and I think we singled out the COA and recreation last time, looking for very nominal increases on a
And veterans.
$49 million budget,
And veterans.
and veterans, that I would hope that we recognize, I understand the need to make cuts, but we're talking such nominal numbers in those departments that it would be nice if we could make an attempt to still assist them.
Yeah. And there's certain budgets that are bare bones, so those are the ones that won't be touched,
Okay, thank you.
So the other thing on here is projected new growth issues for the future of Carver and potential financial setbacks facing the town going forward. I think we've covered a lot of that tonight. Obviously, the North Carver project was a blow. I think almost $7 million in mitigation agreements out the window. I do understand that there's been a subdivision approval, although it's not defined as to what it's gonna be, but it's, I guess, an approved subdivision which locks the current zoning for 8 years on that property now. And who the hell knows what they're gonna build over there. But if someone tries to go in there and do it by right, then there is no mitigation agreement. This is what we're gonna build.
Well, I do believe that, my understanding is that public safety always has a chance to weigh in.
Yeah.
And if they were to say that they could not properly protect whatever was going in there, that could stop the.
Well, that's what helped. That's
Yeah.
what helped with, because public safety is the one that did 90% of that mitigation.
I'm just saying, if someone tried to go in and do what Hillwood was planning, public safety, I believe, would have a voice in
Yes.
suggesting that they couldn't
Yes,
follow
yeah.
through with that.
There are also issues now with North Carver Water District and whether Middleborough is gonna stay connected to the town through the meter pit, or whether we're gonna sink more money into North Carver, what we're gonna do with that going forward.
Do we ever investigate the idea of just moving totally to Middleborough and working out a?
Middleborough is willing to sign an MOA. They're putting a meter pit in, well, actually, we're paying to
Yeah.
put the meter pit in, so that they will bill the town of Carver for the water that runs through that meter. The town of Carver will bill the individual end user for what shows up running through their meters. But we're on the hook to Middleborough because they can't lien your property if you don't pay your water bill. So, and Middleborough is willing to do it. I've discussed it. Dave said he's talked with people over there. In fact, the select board just voted, and Middleborough Select Board voted in agreement also to use, because they both use KP Law. So
Yeah.
they've agreed, both sides have agreed to let Greg Corbo advise on
Yeah.
that project to put the
And-
meter pit in.
Yeah, that's only on the meter pit, not on the
Not
purchase
on
of
the
water.
MOA for the purchase of the water, that's right. But they're willing to do it. I'm not sure that they would be as inclined to continue to be hooked up if something huge gets built in North Carver, but that would be a bridge we just have to cross at that time. I just think that the North Carver Water Department is, another hole in the ground we're just pouring money in.
And not to bring up something that got beat like a dead horse last year, but the idea that they pay for their own capital improvement,
They're paying for it this year,
they are.
am I correct?
Well,
They haven't provided me a budget yet, but
Well-
it has been discussed.
There's $600,000 plus in their checking account. They owe the town $210,000 for the filters, and they can pay their own bond payment. Because this committee, I believe, I could be wrong, maybe I'll be the only no vote, But this guy will vote no on the bond payment. They got 600 grand in their checking account. Write the check. Pat?
No, I'm agreeing with you.
I had 2 votes. Can make that a motion very quickly. Enough. Just my opinion.
Based on what we've gone through tonight, how long do you think you need before you may be able to come back and say, well, looks like we can do this, we can't do that, we can do this, so that the deficit works out to be, instead of 900,000, we've closed the gap so it's 300,000 or 400,000?
You having a meeting next Monday?
The 20th is a
that's
holiday and it's school vacation week.
Oh, that's right.
The 27th is the following Monday, and the 7th of March will have to be the date that we have to get together with the select board, capital outlay, FinCom, and the select board to finalize the warrant, because the warrant has got to be published by the 10th, because it's 30 days before town meeting.
So next
So
week,
it's next Monday,
Yeah.
or we can try to do something later this week. But I don't know that you'll be ready, so why don't we
Yeah, no.
plan on next Monday? We
Monday
have to
night,
do a
yeah.
double header that week. And if you want to bring in a department or something like that, then let me know and we'll schedule that.
oops.
But I'll grab the placeholder when I get home tonight for next Monday in this room, and we'll just leave it, part of the budget. Do you want to have capital outlay joint,
It's up to you. I mean,
Beth?
Yeah,
I
so it
think, when is
depends
your
which-
meeting?
We don't have one set up yet for the individual departments because we were gonna do a joint with finance committee, but it depends who we're bringing in. They don't all have capital items.
Well, we have 2 capital
Yeah.
committee members in. We need 1 more, you'd have a quorum.
I'm up for it, don't meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I think it'd just be easier on the department heads instead of having them, because time is tight. So it's gonna be, twice in 1 week for some of the departments if you're trying to scrunch it all together.
Yep.
So let's just plan on next Monday.
Yep.
I'll let you know in plenty of time whether or not it's gonna include capital or not, based on what you let me know. Now, bear in mind, I gotta publish a agenda by Thursday.
I guess the other issue would be if you could address, if we did pull those things together to bond, what the rates might look like and what the anticipated payments would be going forward, to have that information.
Yep. And also what we can do with that money that we've got set aside already. Where does it, can it go where we want it to go, or is it gonna be locked into going back into the capital plan? Not that I'm opposed to it, because there's a lot of things on the capital plan. But I'd like to really dig down through that trial balance and find out what money is in there that we could, we should have otherwise swept, if there's money that we could take out. So there's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of work for you guys. I get it.
And
But
can I just ask one question?
Beth's about to give you some more work. Hold on.
No, I just wonder
Don't say
which
one
way
more
we're going.
question, because that's the fourth one more question.
I'm sorry. So are we gonna keep the FY '24 forecast the way we had it, or are we gonna try to go back at all how we used to do it? Are we just gonna keep it this way? As far as the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3?
I mean,
the way
what do
we're
you
funding?
prefer? Do you prefer it the old way, or?
But if I put in that one.
Oh, you're talking about the one-third,
you're-
yeah,
The school committee's meeting, is it tomorrow?
Tonight. yeah.
To take a vote on
I mean, can we leave it off? I guess that's what I'm
You're
not
talking about the
sure.
800,000 distribution for the 1/3, 1/3,
Solar,
1/3?
you're talking about the solar
Yeah, I
pilots?
guess it's like about 800,000.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I just don't see how we could go back to that now. You'd be going from a 900,000 to a 1,000,007 deficit.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying, I think we need to be cognizant of it and going forward, try to wean ourselves off of it by the time we get to the end of the 25
I
years.
just didn't know if we could just wean ourselves off, or if we had voted on always doing it this way.
Well, all we gotta do is go back to town meeting when this got approved. This was stuff that was done at town meeting.
I'm not even sure, I mean, I know the selectmen set the policy. I don't know necessarily that it was a town meeting
Doesn't,
approval.
yeah,
I'm pretty
I
sure that
think it was.
the net metering
Huh?
solar credits
Was it-
were, that was all approved at
Was it?
town meeting.
Yeah.
I think that Michael did a PowerPoint presentation
I think he did. I
that sold that.
So we've been doing it in violation of a town meeting vote?
I
think so.
didn't say
For
that.
how long?
I didn't
Just
say that.
last year
We
and
need
this
to
year.
find that out.
I can find that out.
When did it, was it ever done right?
This is a
Or
budget.
if it was done right, for how long?
Was it ever done right?
When did it change?
I would guess it was done right while Michael was here because everything was fresh at that point in time. My guess would be it got lost in the mist of time after we had some changes in financial leadership.
Well, it changes,
Yeah.
and then you come up a little bit short, there's money over here, grab this, put it over here,
Let's find out.
you know?
It just doesn't help us in terms of where we are, though. I mean, it's,
Yeah, it
you can go
doesn't.
back and
Right.
we can shoot the guys that did it wrong, but
Michael was involved, there's always a question about what's going on there.
Well, it could be the case in some of these funds we want to take money out of. They could have been a vote that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole thing is I'm really on a real hard push to make this process as transparent as possible. I've looked at some other towns' websites, and you talk about complete, not that we're not, but as far as electronically goes on the website, the transparency is amazing to me. They put their entire budget, their entire payroll, names, what they do for a living with the town, what they were paid last year, everything is right on the website. Plymouth does it, Norwood does it, it's incredible to me. And all the employees that have contracts are all on the websites, everything is transparent. So you don't have what you get with the runaway conspiracy theories, you know. All of a sudden, it comes out that, oh, you know, Carver didn't put a third into this account. Well, how long has it been going? Oh, probably for 25 years. It's already been in place for 3. But by the time the story is all done, it was $100 million, and it's been going on like this for 30 years. And that's the problem with having lack of information on the website. And it's also difficult to bring in people who weren't here when this all happened and say, can you go digging through, God only knows where the paperwork is, and try to find it. And for all we know, it's in a box in the attic, which I understand isn't necessarily all in boxes. Some of it is just dumped, so. Because we're gonna go try to find some stuff from the planning board from 2013, that'll be fun.
I think one other thing is if you read the financial management
Yeah.
policies, they're exactly that, policies. They aren't written in stone.
No,
There's actually flexibility so that what we've done, while not following the original intent, is also not necessarily illegal.
well, no, it's not illegal, but one of the things in the policy was the 7.5%. And there was one year where the suggestion was to change that to a percentage.
Right. No, I'm just saying
And it
that,
also says in here now that the split is still 69.68 and 30.31.
right,
That has to
that's
get
what I'm
updated.
saying is that these aren't, although they were formally adopted or approved at town meeting, they do not restrict. Town meeting still ultimately, when they vote the budget, can do whatever they want in the distribution of the funds. So there aren't any restrictions. This is intended to be, in fact, it states right inside, it's a guideline that we're supposed to use in constructing the budget.
No, I agree. This isn't the law,
Right.
so.
But I just feel like we voted on that at town meeting. I think we just need to look into
On
it.
the third, we
Yeah.
did.
But again, as a policy, not, I don't think, as a
No, I don't
technical-
believe the
Just
town
as a
meeting
policy,
vote, the
okay.
third, and the third was, that's how it got approved. I'm pretty sure that's how it got
As a
sold. I
separate,
don't
and then we
believe it
had a
was,
separate article just for the pilot programs?
I'm telling you, I believe that's the case because the big discussion was, and I can remember talking to Michael and I can remember talking to Meg about this. And they tried to drill it in that you can't use that money, you can't use one-time money for the for regular town expenses. And even though it's a 20 or 25-year contract, it's gonna end. And when it does, the money is still in the levy.
I mean, it's listed here under F in financial policy, so I think that's what we approved, but I would
And that
still,
was, I believe it was a town meeting, no, well, it's easy enough to find out, it's only 2017, so that's not hard to locate. In fact, I think I'll go check, because I think the minutes are online, as a matter of fact.
yeah, I mean, my recollection from the discussions was that that was the intention, but it didn't lock us in, so we should be able to find out.
Okay. So I guess we've given you a whole ton of homework.
Yeah, that's all right.
We had nothing to do tomorrow anyway, right? Anybody else? Are we all done beating these people up? That's it, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
So I'm gonna plan on Monday,
Then on Monday,
and we'll talk Wednesday to see where
all
you're at.
wrapped up.
Huh?
We'll have it all wrapped up.
Well, and then we'll go from there. If we have to change it from Monday to another date, we can, but I'm gonna.
Oh, no,
I'll put
Monday's
the-
good.
I'll put the reserve in for Monday, and we just need an agenda.
Yep.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
thank
Let us
you.
know, and then whether or not you want capital.
I thought you were doing that, right?
Yeah, as long as the departments that we bring in have capital, we'll do a capital.
Well, let's bring capital in.
Okay, we'll bring capital.
Let's bring it in.
You want to bring a couple in?
Yeah,
So that's the 13th at 7?
Yes, sir.
We can do 6:30.
We can do 6:30.
Ah, okay.
6:30? You
Yes,
sure?
fine.
Can you do 6:30?
Yeah.
Even better.
Everybody good on the 13th at 6:30?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Feel
you,
bad
guys.
for
thank you, guys. Thank you,
having to
Sue.
hit so late, but
I'm just late.
thank you. Okay, much anticipated. The update of the proposed FinCom bylaw for town meeting warrant. Mr. Clark,
I believe you distributed it to everybody to
Mr.
have
Maha.
a chance to
I
review.
did. Does everybody have that?
And it's gone through several incarnations. Remember, we looked at the current bylaw, we looked at a revised bylaw, we looked at bylaw with minimal changes, more extreme changes. And this is sort of a compromise between all of that based on the direction that Pat and I received last time. So this is the one we're recommending should be sent as, to fill in the placeholder that we have on the warrant.
This is the one that I sent you?
Yes.
with the- Okay.
Yep.
So this is the one that says the changes are, it's further understood, the Finance Committee is an advisory committee to the Select Board and does not have the authority to override any budget decision made by the Select Board, should said board disagree with the recommendations of the Finance Committee. That's not in here. Mark Townsend asked me about the, actually Bob Fennessy did, because Mark asked him. It's in, the wording in the placeholder is for a stipend. And Mark thought we were asking for a stipend increase, and I said,
Oh, they
no.
got confused with
They got confused with
the
it.
planning
because
board, I think, right?
The current, yeah, the current bylaw says that the Finance Committee shall serve without pay, except for the chairman, who could get reimbursed for actual expenses. Well, that was changed in 2016 by a town meeting vote, but it was never changed in the writing of the bylaw.
Yeah, they had a reference, I think, back to the town meeting that changed it,
Yeah.
but didn't spell it out.
It didn't, so, no, they didn't even reference that, they just said that it never got changed, period. I had to go dig back to the governance committee, and that's where the article for town meeting came out of, was the governance committee.
I thought it did, but anyway.
But, so, anyway, so now, the wording that we've come up with is that the members of the Finance Committee may receive a stipend determined by a vote of the town at their annual town meeting and so listed in Appendix C, elected and appointed officials. That's the appendix that's on the backside of the town warrant. And may be reimbursed for actual expenses incurred in the discharge of their official duties. Then it goes on to say, any registered voter of the town shall be eligible for appointment to the Finance Committee, except that no elected member of the Select Board or regular full or part-time town employee or person holding a position of financial responsibility with a star for the town shall be eligible for membership on the Finance Committee. No member of a town committee or board shall be authorized to vote as a member of the Finance Committee on any matter pertaining to the budget or funding of a committee or board of which he is a member.
In which, so part of that should probably say they.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, okay, we can change that to they.
He or she.
The Select Board exclusion shall not apply to membership on capital outlay as described in the Capital Outlay Committee bylaw 471. And then it goes, the definition of a person of financial responsibility shall be defined as a resident hired to perform or consult on legal, accounting, or assessing duties for the town and be paid for this service as a contractor. So this defines what financial responsibility is. This clearly states what we already do now. Beth doesn't vote on the fire department because Josh is on the fire department. I don't vote on Concom because I sit on Concom. You guys, you don't vote on if we had a vote for the Cable Advisory Board, you'd abstain from that. So we self-police. Walter abstained from the grant application for Shane Gives Thanks. Nobody had to tell Walter, you can't vote on this. We self-police, we always have, we always will.
The big change here is the original article said, article said that, bylaw, that you can only be on the finance committee and cannot be in any other committee. This
Well, it
removed-
didn't. That's the trouble. It
Well,
didn't really say
it was
that.
interpreted to say
That's
that.
correct.
This clarifies that, so there is no restriction. You can be on any other committee. According to this bylaw, this is what we're submitting to town meeting to approve.
Excuse me, you want to use the word "they,"
Yeah,
or do you want to use the
you
word
can do
"he"
he,
slash
she,
"she"?
he slash she, either one.
She, or, you know.
Okay, of which.
But
he,
that's,
she
but
is-
that's one of the big changes, is that it used to be, it was interpreted that a member of the FinCom could
That
not
is
be on
correct.
any other board or committee.
Well, because it used the word that no.
Officer.
You couldn't be an elected official, i.e. you couldn't be a member of the select board, you couldn't be a town employee or any other officer. And then it was further interpreted, and it's kind of a catch-22, that if you sit on any board, committee, or commission in the town, you are in fact an officer of the town, of the town. Well, if you're an officer of the town, you can't sit on the committee. But as soon as you get put on the committee, you become an officer of the town. So therefore, you still can't be on the committee. And to the point that if you want to get right into the nitty-gritty of it, we're using the words full or part-time employees because every one of us get a W-2 from the town of Carver if we take the stipend. So technically, we are employees in the town. And if you don't define the employee word, then that would also exclude. So the bylaws, and this is just the tip of the iceberg on what's in the bylaws. Some of these bylaws are just, you shouldn't need a Philadelphia lawyer to interpret a bylaw.
But this really came up as an issue because it was being challenged that someone sitting on the finance committee
Yeah,
could not
right.
be in any other board,
Yeah, sitting on Concom.
or whatever.
And then Pat got elected to the RDA, and Ron sits on the cable advisory.
I was on the COA board
And you're on the
and the
COA.
finance committee 6-7 years ago,
Yeah.
when I had to get off the COA because of the interpretation that you can't be on the finance committee and on any other board.
So
So
this just clears it up. And I could understand the restriction, and some cities and towns, absolutely, you're on FinCom, that's it. But it depends on how their charter reads. You know.
Yeah, we did a study, Pat and I did a study of all the local towns. The only one that has no restrictions is Kingston. They don't even reference anything. They don't even talk about financial conflicts. Any resident can be on the finance committee. Most of the other towns have wording very similar to ours, which makes me think it came out of, the way back when someone wrote it and everyone just copied it,
Right.
because it uses the term officer in there again. And I think it just, why reinvent the wheel? Let's just take it from
Right.
Rainham, or let's take it from Taunton, or whatever.
But oddly enough, it is the finance committee that puts on Middleborough's town meeting, and they invite the select board to attend.
Right, well, Middleborough is different. I mean,
That's the way
definitely.
Middleborough's charter is set up. The FinCom does the budget. That's
But
it.
they also have a financial advisory committee too,
Yes,
don't they? So they've almost,
And the select board still has to approve the warrant, so.
right.
It gets into that stuff there, but we're strictly advisory. We can sit before the select board at our joint meeting, come up with the proposed warrant, and we can say, no, we're absolutely against this, and the select board can say, thank you very much, we all vote for it. And it will be on the warrant, and it will go to town meeting. And if it is that good, bad scenario, then it becomes the floor fight as to what's town meeting gonna vote on, and there's nothing that upsets town meeting more than the select board and the FinCom getting in the floor fight.
So
It unsettles.
we were trying to address the financial interest in here, but also clarify the fact that this is not restricting you from being on any other committee. So when if this is what we use to go to town meeting, those are gonna be the two issues that are gonna be discussed.
Right.
Financial exposure, or financial, possible, conflict of interest, and the idea that we're changing the rules so that it's very clear that you can be on Concom, or you can be in the COA board, or you can be on anything else.
Right.
And be on the finance committee.
That's right.
And we think the wording is such that it clearly indicates that any conflict of interest would be policed. And that in fact, it says they cannot vote. It says anybody that has one of those conflicts.
That's
So-
right.
So the question is, are you all comfortable with us passing this on to the chairman and asking him to submit this on our behalf to be the FinCom bylaw?
Yeah, I am.
Make a motion.
I think it looks good.
Need a motion?
I'll make a motion, for the new FinCom bylaw to be submitted, so,
To the select board
to the select board
for inclusion in the warrant.
for inclusion in the 24 warrant.
Motion made and seconded to accept the changes to the FinCom bylaw and to request the select board include them in the placeholder we have set in the warrant. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimously. Submit that tomorrow.
Good job, guys. It's a lot of work.
All right, finally getting down to the end here. Minutes.
They were from last November?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So I think, I read these, I think Ashley, I think your name might be missing a Z up at the top.
Oh, my own name. I never said I was good.
It just caught my eye when I was
You
reading
know,
it.
it's probably your spell check, because
Yeah.
I'll tell you, your spell check consistently misspells. It's, well, my computer finally just fixes it now, but Pat Mahar's name, his spell check hates your last name. And it hates Bob Fennessy's last name.
Yes, it does.
You have to actually add it to the dictionary to have it stop and do it the right way.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 7th.
Second?
Motion made and second to approve the minutes of November 7th, 2022 meeting. Okay, everybody was here. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. I don't have any other topics. Any committee member comments? I'm sorry for the long meeting tonight, but I think we accomplished a lot. Hearing none. Next meeting date will be the 13th, next Monday night. Go ahead, Ron.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's it, we're out. Thank you.
So Ashley, I met your husband.